Hey, before we jump in, let me name what this space is. So, this is part of an ongoing teaching series where I'm trying to help people slow down, make sense of what's actually happening beneath the surface, and build capacity to lead and respond differently. Hey, before we jump in, let me name what this space is. This is part of an ongoing teaching series where I help people slow down, make sense of what's actually happening beneath the surface, and build a capacity to lead and respond differently. So my name is Jesse Ross. I'm a community leader, an entrepreneur, and a facilitator, and I work at the intersection of leadership, culture, community, and systems. You have to forgive me. My just getting over a cold, so I'm kind of working through a bunch of stuff, but I didn't want too much time to go by before I recorded this video. Most of my work is really just focused on helping individuals and organizations move from good intentions to real capacity, especially when that work gets uncomfortable. So around here, we don't do hot takes. We do proximity. We do reflection. We do responsibility. So if you're looking for something that's quick, that's tidy, that's easy to digest, but really nice, this is probably not it. But if you're trying to understand what the moment feels, and how this moment feels harder, and why this moment feels harder than it should, then I just encourage you to stay with me. So let me start by saying something that might sound a little backwards. For a lot of us, what is slowing us down right now isn't just resistance from people who don't care. It's actually coming from people who do care, right? People who are educated, people who are well-intentioned, people who are showing up. But yet, it feels like you're stuck. And I don't think you're stuck because you're failing. I think you're stuck because we're trying to solve systemic problems using cultural habits that we were not taught to question, right? So if you've ever left a meeting thinking like, yo, why did that go sideways? If you've ever thought, we keep having the same conversations, and if you ever been in a situation where you felt you were committed and exhausted at the same time, this is what I'm talking about. So before I get into these 4 patterns, I just want to slow us down and name why this matters right now. At the time of this recording, we've had a long January, if you were in the United States at least. And if you're in Minnesota, we've had even a longer January. We are in a moment of pressure on institutions, on leaders, on educators, on people who never signed up to be public facing, but they now are. And statements have been made and demanded very quickly. Decisions have been scrutinized. And relationships were already strained before, but now are on the brink, right? Trust is already thin. And when pressure rises, culture shows up faster than strategy. So what you end up defaulting to, right, under pressure is not actually your values, it's your conditioning. And that's why people are frustrated. That's why people are afraid. I don't believe it's just because they don't care. I believe it's because they don't have the tools, or the tools that they've relied on no longer match the moment. So I'm about to walk through 4 cultural patterns, and they're not personality traits, they're not moral judgments, but they're behaviors, they're habits that get reinforced over time, especially inside institutions. And they show up mostly, or most clearly, when things get super uncomfortable. So we're talking about urgency, we're talking about perfectionism, we're talking about individualism, and we're talking about the right to comfort. So as I go through these, I want you doing less agreeing and just notice, right? Not who does this, but where does this live? Inside your organization, inside your house, inside your family, inside your leadership, inside your relationships, inside yourself. So let's talk about the first pattern, urgency. Urgency can sound righteous. It sounds like care. It sounds like action. It sounds like we can't wait. And sometimes urgency is real. But urgency becomes harmful when speed replaces relationships or learning or even repair. And most of us have been in meetings where something super urgent came up, right? A crisis, a complaint, a public issue, an emergency meeting gets called. There's no prep. Decisions get made super fast and usually by the same group of people. And then later someone goes, why wasn't I a consultant? Or I would have named that, or we missed this. That's because urgency did not create clarity. It actually created exclusion. And inside real institutions and in organizations, urgency often looks like decisions being announced instead of discussed. It looks like burnout, and that's sometimes framed as commitment. Feedback sometimes is labeled as delay, and the people like closest to the harm actually get hurt the most. I really hope, as I'm trying to make sure I can breathe, I really hope that people recognize that the hard truth about urgency is that it usually just protects the existing power while convincing us we're being productive, right? Like, so do me a favor, just pause and think about who benefits from things when we move fast. Who absorbs the cost when we move fast? All right, second pattern, perfectionism. Perfectionism disguises itself as excellence, right? So it sounds responsible, it sounds thoughtful, it likes high standards, but perfectionism becomes a problem when fear actually replaces learning. So you've probably heard in some capacity, right? We're not ready to say anything yet, or we need the right language or messaging, or we don't want to get this wrong. And then weeks pass, sometimes months, and nothing is done, nothing is said. Because perfectionism doesn't prevent harm, it actually prevents growth. And in perfectionist cultures, sometimes, or most times, mistakes feel dangerous. Learning gets replaced with performance. And people actually stop trying because the cost of messing up is too high. So just pause for a second. Where does the fear of getting it wrong slow down movement or progress? And who's actually allowed to learn out loud? And who isn't? Third pattern is individualism. So individualism teaches us to locate problems in people instead of in patterns. Yeah, say that one more time. Individualism teaches us to locate problems inside of people instead of in patterns. So if you've ever heard like just that one person, they didn't mean it that way, or this was a misunderstanding. It's when we keep the same things happening across teams, departments, or classrooms. It's not individual behavior, right? That's a culture. And you cannot fix systemic problems with individual solutions. So if we over focus on intent, if we avoid examining impact, when we isolate harm to one person, systems stay untouched. So inside individualistic cultures, training individuals replaces changing the structure, right? We focus on missing the patterns that are clear right in front of us. We call those anomalies. And responsibility shifts away from the people who are supposed to be responsible to the people who are impacted. So ask yourself, where do we rely on good people instead of good systems? Now, the fourth pattern is the right to comfort. And this one's a lot harder to name, which is why I saved it for last, because sometimes it shows up as being polite. I know a little bit about that. Living in Minnesota, we call something Minnesota nice. And the right to comfort sounds like, this is hard. Can we lower our tone? Let's not get excited. And I think we gotta recognize that discomfort is actually not harm. Sometimes discomfort is actually the cost of growth. And in comfort-centered places, difficult truths can get softened or delayed, right? People that are most impacted are asked to regulate their own emotions. And when we think about pace or change, it's actually set by those who are least affected, usually the people that are far away from the problem. So again, ask yourself, whose comfort actually sets the tone? And who's asked to wait patiently? So here's how these patterns actually work together. I know, you've been waiting on this, I got you. So urgency speeds us up. Perfectionism actually shuts us down. Comfort controls or likes to control the conversation. And individualism isolates responsibility. When all of those go unnamed, people end up burning out or disengage or quietly quit. And that's why progress stalls or stops when the intentions are super sincere. So the question that people are asking typically when I get to this part is like, okay, what should we do? Well, first, let's talk about what not to do. You can't always rush to fix yourself or even the problem. You can't try to perform or be performative around language or using words that you don't actually understand. And you can't blame or demand action from people who are already tired or have tried it, right? You can't go through a checklist and say like, all right, we got to be able to knock this out. No, this is actually about building the capacity. So if we're going to move from complacency to capacity, we have to recognize that awareness is not the goal. Capacity is what we're shooting for. And when we're building capacity, we're thinking about like the ability to stay present, to stay accountable, to stay strategic when the work gets uncomfortable. One of the most helpful starting points is actually taking a cultural competency assessment, not to grade yourself, but as a mirror. And if you want to do some of that work, you can individually or with your team. I actually work one-on-one with organizations to help people identify where patterns show up and where shared language can be created and really moving them out of that capacity. So reach out if you want to. But in closing, I have found that every meaningful shift that I've seen in organizations or in individuals really started when someone stopped asking, am I a good person? And started asking, am I building the capacity for this moment, right? What is being required of me in this moment? And am I building that? Am I working towards that? That is actually the work. And I really hope that this helped you, at least grounded you a little bit, but recognize that this is part of a longer series. So I'm hoping that in the next sessions, we can dive deeper into what it actually looks like to interrupt these patterns inside these institutions. Again, we're thinking about your work, your workplace, your education, your organization, your family, your system, your culture, whatever those things may be. Because if this stirred up something inside of you, that means you're headed down the right path. And if my voice annoyed the crap out of you, sorry. Hopefully it'll be better by the time I record another one. But I really hope that you don't rush past this, that maybe you play it over again and just listen to the audio as you're driving or as you're kind of resting and kind of getting the day started. Because I really hope that there's something in here that sticks with you and that we can do to start interrupting these patterns. Appreciate your time.